I think I've become a big fan of Maggie Smith in another British series that's on TV, Abington Downey, and so I always enjoy whatever she's in. But I love that phrase. Most things don't work as we expect, but what happens instead often turns out to be the good stuff. Now that's a long view of life that one can say that. Today I'm talking about the difference between movements and institutions, from the macro to the micro. So institutions are sort of boring to talk about. One of the institutions that comes to mind, I know, is, for most of us, are weddings, marriage. Marriage is an institution, and I love what Jock Foxworthy says about marriage, that if you get married for sex, it's like buying a 747 for peanuts. You might not get what you asked for. Well, that was my attempt at a joke, Beth. I don't know. Told her I didn't like telling jokes. Now she knows I don't. But some institutions we live in, and we don't even know why we're doing it. Most of the institutions we have that support our lives and that we support them are all around us. The church is one, of course. The Methodist movement started out as just that, a movement. It was John Wesley and a bunch of his friends in the 18th century trying desperately to energize their church, the Anglican Church, the Church of England. And so the Methodist movement was to simply get people, the folk, re-engaged in the life of the church. Wesley took the messages out to the people and developed ways of helping people grow spiritually. And then living out their faith, doing good works. This eventually moved into the colonies of America. But once this Revolutionary War happened, almost every one of the Episcopal priests or the Church of England priests left because they would be traitors otherwise. The head of the church, of course, is the King of England, or the Queen we have now. So people were without pastors, without someone to administer the communion service. Wesley, for him, that was really the ultimate of worship, the communion service. They had Methodist Society buildings in England, and you can even go to the one he lived in West London now. And then they would have their meetings and rousing sermons, and I don't know. Would go on for hours. Today's won't, I promise. But then he would take the group and they would go to the church building where they would have communion. Well, that being the case, Wesley ordained 2 people to be Methodist ministers. And they come back over to America after the Revolutionary War, and that begins the Methodist Church in America. You see, that movement, a frontier movement of America, was thrilling and vibrant, and people wanted to be a part of it, and it was quite the show. There are tremendous characters in the Methodist Church history. One I love that was in this area and in Kentucky was the name of Peter Cartwright. And I imagine him, if you're old like me, you would remember Bonanza and Hoss Cartwright. I kind of see him as Hoss Cartwright, great big guy, kind of lovable, but if you got him in a fight, he could take you. And Peter Cartwright got in lots of fights. He would go to a bar and say, "You come to the church, I'm in town, you come to church." And the guy said, "No, I won't." And he would beat him up until he came. Now, that's not an evangelism tool we use today, but it's been suggested here and there. A movement has energy. A movement, the hierarchy's it's flat, it's broad. Ideas come from the bottom, and it doesn't matter where they come from, people engage them. A movement is energizing, and there's a goal, and it's such a compelling goal that a vision that people want to be a part of it. It's clearly stated. And And like if you're old as me, you remember several movements from the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. There's the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the peace movement, the gay rights movement, and there are lots of movements, even most recently the Occupy Wall Street movement, about economic injustice, and people are interested in that, not just here but around the world. And even now, they're calling the student riots in Istanbul Occupy movement. There's an unrest. Now, sociologists will say that they're not typically going to be a movement because they don't have a clear vision, and that's where they'll fall apart. But those that do survive that early push of leaders, and they grow, and they end up becoming what we call institutions. And institutions have rules and way of being and doing, and eventually they build monuments to remember a special moment in life. And that happened also in the Scripture. There's a story in Luke chapter 9, and it's the Scripture I'm using today. And it comes in a particular point in Jesus' journey toward Jerusalem and crucifixion. And Jesus needed time alone. He took his closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, and said, "Boys, we're going to go on a hike, we're going to go up a mountain, and we're going to pray." And that's what they did. But like the boys, as I like to call them, when I close my eyes, I tend to fall asleep. And that's what they did. When they woke up, they saw a vision. No other way they could describe it. It was mystery. For before them was Jesus talking to Moses and Elijah. Moses representing the law and Elijah representing the prophets, coming together, conferring with Jesus. And what we were told in the Scriptures they were talking about is Jesus' big exodus from Jerusalem. They leave. Peter, in his exuberance, says, "Well, let's build 3 monuments, one to Moses and Elijah and to you, and let's stay here. This is awesome. This is I can't believe this happened kind of moment." And a cloud descends, and they hear a voice say, "Just listen to my son." Next thing we see in the Scripture, they're all walking down the mountain, going back to the folks, to the people, to the problems of the world. We like to escape, and we need that. We need time away. We need time to rejuvenate ourselves, but not to escape the problems of life, but to energize ourselves, our best selves, so that we can face those problems and challenges of life. If we build monuments as a church, we stop, in my opinion, it's the beginning of the end of the movement. We stop the movement. And the danger is that we end up worshiping the monument. Let's keep the institution going just because that's what we always know. And this is happening across denominations all over. And it's not just Protestant mainline, it's Catholic, it's everybody. They're struggling with what's going to be next in the church. Because things need to change, and they're changing around us, and we don't know what to do. I think Linda was on a cutting edge almost 18 years ago or something when she had a vision for this place, the garden. A place where people wouldn't come into a monument, but would come to a place they might come anyway. A place that was comfortable and songs that they could enjoy, that they knew maybe, and that related to life, and messages that were short, and I promise this one will be too, even though she's not here. Well, I love this choice of the best exotic Marigold Hotel as our movie today. Because in it, the characters are all at a certain point in their lives where they have to make a decision. Life cannot go on as it once was. So the personal movements that they were going in, or they were living in, just, okay, now we're at retirement age. Well, the portfolio isn't there to sustain life that they thought they could. Another person just needed to absolutely change his position in life because he was not happy. The one character that didn't move for money in this movie was the one we first saw today, and the judge at the retirement party, and he says, this is the day, and he walks out, and he's going to return to India, the place of his childhood, where his parents raised him. And he's going to seek out a person with whom he has loved his whole life but abandoned. And in doing so, he teaches the whole group what true love really is. The others are struggling with taking on life in the future. And I love that they risk to do so. Many years ago, there was a woman who wrote a letter to Ann Landers, and it stayed with me. It has stayed with me an awfully long time. Because the woman asked Anne if she should go back to school. Her hesitancy, she says, was, I'm 58. When I get done, I'll be 62. And if you remember Ann Landers, her pithy responses were just so cogent. She said, well, how old will you be in 4 years if you don't go to school? What holds us back from pursuing that dream inside of us? What fears paralyze us from moving forward and engaging life in our visions? Well, if you're like Sonny, the young man who owns this hotel, you see that as it could be, not yet as it is. And that engagement is so powerful. And people want to be a part of that kind of energy until you move into it and it's just in shambles. Well, as I said earlier, I love the character that Maggie Smith plays. She moves probably more than any other character in the whole movie from a position of fear, anxiety, prejudice into embracing her surroundings and actually helping Sonny at the end. In the end. At the end. Well, there are some great quotes in this movie, and I want to emphasize them with you because I think they capture some of the great hope we have of life. One, Judi Dench's character is writing a blog, and she says the challenge is to cope with life, cope with it. Not just to cope, though, but to thrive. Not just to get through life, but to thrive in where you are. The disappointments we may have is just simply that. And to take life as it comes and then make something really grow into life. The next one is the person who risks nothing, does nothing, and has nothing. And Evelyn, the Judi Dench character, she tells her readers that you want to challenge what you are assuming and then push through it. Risk. You see, that's the biggest thing we need to do. Instead of being stagnant and institutional in our own lives, we need to risk and step out of what we always do and do something different. What is that thing inside of you that God is calling you to do? Well, the last one is the only real failure. I love this one. The only real failure is the failure to try. And the measure of success is how well we cope with what the outcome is. There are many things that life will present to us that we don't know in the future. But what I can tell you is that God is with us in the midst of it. And I believe that the Spirit of God is planting inside of you, at this place, a seed for the future. And I don't know what that is, but you do. Listen to those whispers in your heart. I believe that's the Spirit of God speaking to you. Have the courage to water those seeds and see them grow.